Hello, everybody. This is Nairanjana Dasgupta, and I am chairing this session for Dr. Nancy Geller today. Nancy has been an instrumental person in my career and really has shaped my life in so many different ways that I'm delighted to be doing this. A lot of you already know a lot about Nancy. She's been around for a while and been a fantastic leader. I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts. One is Nancy is a leader who has the personal touch. She has always looked out for people. And I remember I met Nancy when I was a brand new assistant professor, knew nobody. I was in a conference. I think I was one of only 4 people in the conference, and all the other 3 were like stalwarts in the field: Nancy Geller, Juliet Schaefer, and I think Ruth Marcus Perez. So I felt lost, and Nancy was the one who reached out to me and said, hey, you want to talk to us, join us? And she really was kind and considerate throughout this process. They all gave plenary talks and I gave a poster, but it didn't matter. Nancy really always kind of reached out and felt that made me feel like part of the crowd. And she just continued to do that throughout her career. In 2011, when she was the president of ASA, she nominated me to be in one of the ASA committees just because she knew that I was an isolated statistician in a department where I didn't have a whole bunch of support. And she's really done everything like that for me. So without further ado, I think, let us welcome Nancy Geller and listen to her talk about leadership. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Nancy, we can hear you.
Can you see me? Yes, I can see me. Okay. Jan, thank you for your introduction. I felt a little like I was listening to my own eulogy. And also, I note that Jan is on the West Coast of the US, and she had to get up at a ridiculous time in the morning to be able to give this introduction. And I just want you to know I appreciate it. So, this talk was motivated by an article I read in the Association for Women in Math newsletter. And it was by a woman who was chair of a mathematics department 3 times. Each term was 3 years, and there was a space between them. And her article was about how leadership and the needs of the department had changed over this vast period. And she currently was a professor emeritus. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. But my view of leadership is really entirely different and perhaps a little humorous. So she compared, this article got me thinking about my own leadership. So I have not served 3 disjoint terms as director of the Office of Biostatistics Research, which we call OBR in governmentese, because I work for the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And in particular, once appointed, there's no term limit. Your term just doesn't end unless you're terminated, which is very difficult to accomplish in the government, or you resign, and you can be encouraged to resign, or you retire, or you die. I joined the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute as chief of the Biostatistics Research branch in 1990. I was young, yes, but I certainly wasn't in diapers. And somehow my term never ended. That means I haven't gotten terminated, resigned, or retired, or died. So why have I done this, and why do I continue? And doesn't it get old? Well, I always wanted to be a leader. My mother was my role model, and while she followed my father's lead most of the time, she became active in community organizations where she rose to become president. At different times, she was president of 2 different organizations. Ma, are you going to do that again? And so she needed to give speeches. I remember as a child listening to her rehearse her speeches over the kitchen sink. Obviously, I wanted to be like her when I grew up. So when the opportunity rose for me to head the biostatistics group at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, I just had to take the opportunity. So for those of you unfamiliar with the role of an National Institutes of Health Biostatistics Unit, which is sometimes called a branch and sometimes called an office, let me begin by describing our role. The NIH is comprised of 23 institutes and centers, and the largest are the Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. Within the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, there's one office, which is a collection of 12 statisticians who collaborate with the scientists within the institute and with investigators outside of the NIH who are funded to conduct large clinical trials. As well, the members of the office conduct their own statistical research, usually related to the studies that they work on. So the Office of Biostatistics Research serves as a primary biostatistical resource for all of the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. The members of the office collaborate broadly, participating in the planning, design, implementation, and monitoring and analysis of funding of studies funded by NHLBI. The OBR's primary mission is to provide objective, statistically sound, and medically relevant solutions to the problems that are presented. When methodology is needed to answer the questions posed, the OBR, Office of Biostatistics Research, is expected to obtain new and valid statistical solutions, which are then published in the biostatistics or medical literature. I head the Office of Biostatistics Research. I didn't think very much about my own leadership until I read that article by this woman who was a math chairman. Self-reflection is not easy. When I interviewed for my position, I was asked what I would give to each individual in the group. My answer was that I tried to give them what they need. To this day, I try to give them what they need, and they each need something different, from very little to a lot of guidance. Leadership comes with a philosophy. I must say, I have few rules. One rule is that we meet every Tuesday from 11:30 to 1. That's today. And all should attend whenever possible. I'm sitting in my home office and we'll leave immediately after this talk to get to the office to be on time for our weekly meeting. It should be very unusual that any of us goes to another meeting at that time. There are reasons to miss an OBR meeting, like being sick or being on vacation, or being called to a meeting with the NHLBI director. But not going to most other meetings at the time OBR meets is a matter of self-respect. If I can't say this word, who can? Biostatisticians were not put on earth to do others' bidding. And if someone insists on a meeting time which conflicts with ours, that conflicting meeting will have to do without us. I've been asked to change OBR's meeting time to accommodate other meetings, and I said I would try. Actually, I lied. I could not imagine what would make anyone think that 12 very busy people could find another hour and a half between 9 and 5, Monday through Friday, when they've set aside Tuesday from 11:30 to 1, since way before the pandemic. Yes, my group's been meeting weekly since before the pandemic. During the pandemic, the meetings were virtual, but now they're hybrid. In-person attendance is encouraged, but not required. I have a secret weapon to encourage in-person attendance: cookies. Every week, I bring a variety of cookies to the meeting. This works so well that when anyone travels abroad, they bring back cookies for the group from foreign lands. Tim Tams from Australia were faves, and we argue over which cookie is best. I call myself the Cookie Monster, and everyone in OBR saves a couple of 100 calories for OBR cookies. Which brings up the need for a sense of humor. It would be hard to sit through a weekly 1.5-hour meeting without an occasional wisecrack. An undergraduate summer student gave a talk recently that was supposed to last 20 minutes. I said we'd give him a half hour because, you know, OBR likes to ask questions. And someone added that we needed an additional 5 minutes for Marty, because Marty always asks so many questions. Marty then alleged that that was because he was slower than everyone else, but he's really pretty smart. We all laughed. When the talk was over, Marty said that the talk was really good. And in fact, when he was an undergraduate, he could never have given a talk like that on that subject. And I said, when Marty was an undergraduate, that subject of the talk didn't exist. Another laugh. Compliments to speakers just happen. So the talk by our summer intern at the end of his internship is one example of what we do during OBR meetings. Yes, there are the usual administrative announcements and discussions, but we also have presentations rather frequently. Used to be about once a month, but I realize that the presentations are much more popular than administrative matters. So in fact, we've increased the presentations. So once a month during the academic year, we have seminars by outside speakers, some virtual and some in person. Those are organized by one of the OBR members, not by me. Changing who's in charge of seminars means we learn about many different topics. Seminars by outside speakers were initiated by me when I first came to NHLBI, but talks about ongoing studies was initiated by another member of the group, in fact, Marty. I'm open to others' ideas. The name was changed to protect the guilty. I'm open to others' ideas. We also open the floor for anything anyone wants to bring up. We end at 1 o'clock, even if that means we have to continue a discussion at the next meeting. I think I can think of exactly one meeting that ran over. At our weekly meetings, I really tried to keep a healthy atmosphere despite occasional disagreements. People can disagree with me or others in the group, and we'll consider all views. I often respond to comments with, "Oh, that's a good point," even though I might not agree. Everyone, no matter how senior or junior, should feel like he or she belongs to the group. Reinforcing expressions of opinion, even when they disagree with mine, makes everyone feel like they belong. That openness is very important for the good of the group. We're lucky that biostatisticians mostly don't have very emotional disagreements. On the rare occasion that the conversation does get heated, I intervene, saying that we need to speak up one at a time and everyone will have a turn to speak. I then start to call on people. Getting so angry that you stop speaking to a colleague is just not permitted. Oh, that's a second rule. After a short cooling off period, I try to reconcile such disagreements by meeting one-on-one with the perpetrators and then meeting with both together. This has almost always worked. The second rule, indeed, is that you must speak to everyone, even if everyone is not your BFF. And for those of you not used to American jargon, BFF means best friend forever. I never force anyone to do anything. I ask if they would like to take on a certain project, usually aligned with their research and/or medical interests, and often tell them they have first refusals. They almost always say yes, they'll take on this project. If they say no, I either accept it or tell them why I think it would be good for them to do it, and would they reconsider? There are no ramifications to refusal, although I have to say that nobody's really refused enough times to put me to the test. Lunch. We eat lunch together almost once a week. We have a room reserved from 1 to 2 p.m. on Tuesday, and anyone in the group is welcome to join. These in-house lunches are not by invitation only, although sometimes some are specifically invited, like when we invite an outside guest. Lunch often ends up with food sharing. Food sharing, yes, it's an important part of my philosophy of leadership. Somebody had a fig tree in their backyard. Wow, that was wonderful. People in the group, that is, those who work for you, should be happy with your leadership and not think they prefer to work for someone else. If they prefer to work for someone else, they'll get another job. Among my current colleagues, 6 have been in the office at least 20 years. I recently told our postbac, whose primary mentor was someone else in the group, in fact, I think she's on with us, that she should take the postbac should take the full tuition scholarship she got from a well-known biostat department. And just because she was thinking about turning it down, I pointed out to her that she was just too comfortable in the Office of Biostatistics Research, and really, she could return as a summer intern in the future. She started to laugh. I told her I really meant it. She was just too comfortable in OBR. She did decide to take the scholarship and left with some trepidation, but happily. I hope she's doing well, and I don't know if she can be on this because she probably has a class. Hiring decisions in the government are technically up to the leader, but I'd never make a decision without all the others' participation. I guess you can call this respect for colleagues. Interviews are essential, and it's best for these to be in person, but of course that wasn't possible during the pandemic. Aside from technical skills, will this person we are interviewing fit into the group? Who will be his or her friends? Will they be cliquish? Will they cause trouble? Technical skills alone are not enough because we need to collaborate both with each other statistically, as well as with our medical colleagues. And collaboration requires good communication skills. Even harder than hiring is letting someone go. It may be surprising that it would hurt me as much as it hurts them. I don't even want to say firing. I never want to have to let someone go. So it's really essential that we make good decisions in hiring and try to take corrective actions if things don't seem to be working out. I liken hiring and firing to letting people, to marriage and divorce. There's nothing like in-person connections, and it amazes me that our meetings go on for an hour and a half, never longer, even when the agenda is slim. For successful group interaction, virtual really just doesn't cut it. Sorry, guys, I'm not in Europe or Australia to give you the talk in person. For a successful group interaction, we got to get together. Much of my Tuesday is filled with one-on-one conversations. If I come in on another day, I let people know so they can talk to me in person. I've observed that inadvertently, the group plays follow the leader. I said this aloud, and they found that shocking. It really would be more polite to say that the leader is a role model. For an example is that I come in every Tuesday for the OBR meeting unless I'm sick. Nothing was ever said that others were expected to come in person, but over time, there are only 2 people who have never shown up, and they have good reasons. I begin the meeting by counting aloud how many are in the room. Does that exert pressure? Of course, unexpectedly, new types of cookies also help. I've never asked how many consider the OBR meeting fun or at least stimulating. meetings at NHLBI are rarely considered to be fun. Another example of being a role model is that the leader publishes. She writes both statistical papers, mostly with others in OBR, and applied papers, most with medical collaborators. And that's what everyone strives for, despite the fact that each prefers one or the other. Still, another example is active participation when we have an outside speaker. The leader learned very early in her professional life that you owe the speaker at least one question. The person who taught me that usually asked if the process the speaker was speaking about was a Brownian process. I think he was a bit pretentious because he was not at all British, but nonetheless, my recollection is that he recycled the same 3 general questions. I don't do that. I usually understand enough of the seminar to ask something relevant. And the result is that OBR loves to ask our visiting speakers questions, and they're not at all hostile. It's a wonderful example of intellectual thriving. A last example is mentoring. The leader mentors most in the group, and I kind of remember meeting Jan in person, and I think it was in Berlin. And there were 4 women at that meeting in Berlin. I think the OBR meetings are not afraid to come to me when they're having problems. I listen and I ask them questions and then try to point out possible solutions and what do you think? I then ask them if they can handle the situation alone or if they need my intervention. Some investigators don't have statisticians on their radar screen, and they're really difficult to deal with. But without getting more specific, we seem to have very few problems. And others in the group mentor one another too. The leader has just gotten an award for mentoring, and she will receive it tomorrow. Another speech. Only time will tell if others will get awards for mentoring also. I guess my leadership doesn't seem to get old, at least to me, because it's evolving. When I came to NHLBI, it was to lead a clinical trials biostatistics group. As biostatistics evolved, shall I say morphed, and the last speaker we heard in this session certainly is an example of a real big extension of biostatistics into something much broader, and now includes bioinformatics, genetics, data science, and even artificial intelligence. My understanding of what skills OBR needs has also evolved, and correspondingly, what we look for in new colleagues. The role of OBR has also evolved from just playing 2 or more armed clinical trials to more elaborate designs and many other kinds of studies. Stagnation would be a cause of death. Last, up to reading that article in the Association for Women in Math newsletter, I didn't appreciate my own strengths, though, and I thought my comedy was just something I couldn't help. Now I realize they're assets that have evolved over my 34 years of leading OBR. Apparently, with some degree of immodesty, whatever I'm doing seems to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for a fantastic overview of your leadership skills and your leadership, sort of your tenets of leadership, I would say. You know, just kind of, I was taking notes. So, and so I think there are a few questions, but I want to start off with a couple of questions of my own. And the first one, I think I was going to do the usual one, what is your biggest achievement, blah, blah, blah. But no, I want to actually go and do something quite different, because you are one of the funniest speakers that I have heard of. Like, you know, you talk about important things, but you make it light and funny and palatable. So My question is going to be, hey, what do you do when your humor doesn't get to the people, when it's deadpan? Like, people are giving you completely bland looks. So let's start there.
I say things like, that was supposed to be funny. Um, but, I think my sense of humor is something you either love or you hate. And my experience is the people who hate it just go away. But I really, I have said aloud, it's okay, you can laugh now.
Okay. I think this is something I'm going to steal from you. Okay, you can laugh now because I have tried and it was like, okay.
I had an interaction, an email interaction after a conference call with a doc, and I have an unusual relate. This is a collaborator not from NHLBI. She's somebody who leads a clinical trial, and we have had a relationship. She had never worked with a biostatistician, and I had said to her, I think you've never worked with a biostatistician, and I'd like to explain to you what we do. And so we kind of became, our relationship is kind of mixed. It's a professional relationship, but it's a friendship. And she joking, I suggested on this conference call that she write to investigators who hadn't responded to a previous message. And she said, would you like to do that? And said, me? And I didn't get it. She was joking. So yeah, I didn't get it. But she said, and I said, I wrote her in an email, I'm really sorry, I missed your humor. But, I don't know if anybody else got it either. But anyway, so, that happens.
Okay, so I have other questions, but some of the questions have already come up, so I'm going to read them to you. You mentioned at the importance of creating a relaxed, goal-oriented atmosphere. In today's fast-paced research environment, what specific strategies do you take to maintain this? And while ensuring high performance?
I remind people that, what they just did was pretty clever and they ought to write it up. We have discussions like, what does it take? What should it take for a statistician to be an author on a paper, an applied paper? What do they have to contribute? And it's a little complicated, and I don't think I can go into details here. But I think that's something that's worth writing up for something like clinical trials. And I've asked for volunteers and of course haven't gotten any, but maybe I'll do it. I not only do I speak, I journal, I write, also sometimes funny. And I've written about some of my experiences. I changed publication requirements in one of my studies because everybody was becoming an author on an ancillary study. And I got this paper and it was a biased analysis and I couldn't be an author on it. So I said, I don't wish to be an author on this. And it turned out it had already been submitted and it took a lot of crap to get my name off the paper. I don't even know if my name is off the paper. But the paper is just not on my CV. I wanted to write up that experience and I thought it would be useful for clinical trials. So I tried, but of course I had to cover up everything and I couldn't. I found I could cover up the trial, I could cover up the investigators, but I couldn't cover up that I was from NHLBI. So actually I decided I couldn't publish it. I just couldn't publish it. But general things about authorship, I think, could be written up.
So There is one question here. So this is from Altia. The last one was from Dong Yoon. So fascinating to hear your views about on what you thought were initially your weaknesses were actually your strengths. What advice would you give to a career young leaders so that they can overcome their own imposter syndromes? Hey, this is what you gave me of my whole life.
Oh, my goodness. I wasn't expecting such a profound question. I think you have to be who you are. So I have a big mouth and I don't mind my own business. And my husband used to say, why don't you learn to mind your own business? And I found myself helping a young epidemiologist with the talk she was about to present, because I thought she was terrific, but her slides were like dense. They were beautiful, but they were not useful in a certain sense. So I shot off my mouth, and it's not my meeting. I'm a fly. I'm supposed to be a fly on the wall. So I wrote later to the head of the group, do you think I was participating too actively? And if you do, I'll shut up from now on. And what he wrote back was, just be yourself. I was very gratified, but I think for me, I have to be careful not to shoot off my mouth too much. That's my personality flaw. Other people, people may not have a sense of humor, and they may be just very genuine, and that's okay. You have to be who you are. I mean, I don't know if you can develop stand-up comedy in your adulthood. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's really just happened to me. And I think actually very important is to keep evolving as a human being, as well as a leader. Things change, you change, life changes. Sometimes you have very serious life-changing events, and you have to go with it. You have to make changes in yourself.
Okay, one more question. Could you talk about some of the unique challenges of leading statistical teams in an organization as large and complex as the NIH, especially when coordinating across disciplines?
That's a great question. By the way, that's a good thing to say. But that is a great question. And that line does not come naturally to me. Well, I'm very lucky that I have an extremely supportive boss right now. He loves us. Not only does he love me, he loves us. And that's very unusual, but I met him when he first came to NHLBI. So he's much younger than I. Everybody's younger than I am. I met him when he first came to NHLBI, and he published a paper that was wrong. And I told his division head, who I was working with on another project, that he had made a mistake. And she said, well, the only thing to do is tell him. So I met this guy for coffee and told him that he had a biased analysis. He compared responders and non-responders. And in cancer, you all know what that means. You have to live long enough to respond. I talked to him, and he said, oh, well, what can we do about it? And I said, well, the next time you're designing a study, why don't we have a chat about the design of the study? And so I established a collaboration with him. And did that for many years. In fact, until I became president of ASA, when my boss told me I had to give up certain things because otherwise I would die. And he was right. That was another boss. I've had 10. I gave this collaboration to one of my colleagues who remains his primary collaboration, and she's doing a wonderful job. And his initial reaction was, oh, but she's not you. And I said, yeah, but she's smarter than I am. And if you're on, you'll know who I'm, if you're in OBR, you'll know who I'm talking about. So I had a long-standing relationship with him, and I had essentially taught him what a biostatistician could do. And now he's the head of the intramural division, and we get a lot of respect. I don't quite know how that happened, but I think the self-respect thing is a big deal. You know, we're collaborators, we're not your servants. That's a very important thing for a biostatistics group to establish. We are collaborators. We're not, you have a deadline tomorrow and you tell me about it today. Oh, I'm really sorry. I cannot possibly accommodate you. And you know, I am not demanding 20 weeks notice that you have a deadline. There are real deadlines and there are false deadlines, and you better learn to distinguish between them. You know, when I need it tomorrow, why do you need it tomorrow? And if the answer is the grant is due, I'm terribly apologetic that I can't help them. But if the answer is, well, I'm going to give a presentation in 3 days, and I say, you don't need it tomorrow, I'm really sorry, I'll do what I can. So that's a big thing. I think people think statisticians are their servants, medical investigators in particular. So, and perhaps other collaborators, I don't know. I have less experience.
Well, I'm not seeing any other question here. So
I'm
there
seeing
is probably
one. I'm
you're seeing
one.
one. Okay,
Dun
okay.
Young.
Question to Nancy.
All right.
Okay.
Full disclosure, Dun Young is my colleague.
Yeah.
And she's one of those people who never says no. And her question is, how do I convince people not to say no? And I don't think I do. They just know that I try to share the load. When projects come to me, I try to share the load. And also people have developed continued collaborations within one subgroup, because we're heart, lung, blood, and basic science. We're all of them. So some people, like Dun Young, who asked the question, collaborate with the lung division and also with some of the intramural investigators who work on lung diseases. So she has not only expertise in biostatistics, and she's damn good, may I say. She knows a lot about lung diseases. I know about bone marrow transplant. I've been doing bone marrow transplant the whole time I've been at NHLBI. And the reason I started that was that I came from cancer. And in cancer, I worked on solids, and bone marrow transplant is liquids. But, you know, cancer is cancer is not cancer. Cancer is bad. Cancer is awful. Cancer is horrible. But anyway, I worked in bone marrow transplant, and I know how that works, how hematopoietic stem cell transplants. Note, I didn't stutter work. So we have different areas of expertise, and I try to encourage people to stay in that direction. So if a lung project comes up, I give it to either Dun Young or someone else in the group who's worked extensively with the lung division.
So there is another question. How do you approach situations when the project urgently needs a statistician's expertise, but they may not be interested or available? How do you handle?
Who's not interested or available? I'm sorry.
I'm assuming the statistician is not interested or available. How do you handle such challenges while respecting individual autonomy?
A good question too. So this not available bit, our job is collaboration, and research is supposed to comprise 20% of our time, and nobody's keeping track. So our job is collaboration. And so I'm not interested and I'm not available, or I'm not available. It's just not an answer. And I hire people who can do anything. I try to hire people who I believe will be able to do anything. So, you know, we had not too long ago, I guess maybe a couple of years ago by now, for the first time, a phase 1 trial in normals. Nobody knew about that. I knew about phase 1 trials in cancer. So do others. In fact, one of the people wrote his thesis in phase 1 trials in cancer. But nobody knew about phase 1 trials in normals. And so one of the people who can do anything was asked to take this on. And she used Dr. Google and the library, and she looked up what was available, and she was able to design this phase 1 trial in normals. That's what OBR is about. I hire people who I believe can do anything. And that, people have expertise in certain areas, but you have to be able to spread out. I realized when I was listening to the last talk, and I have to say I wasn't concentrating, because one of the things I do best is get nervous before I give a question, before I give a talk. But, directed graphs. Okay. So I worked on citations, and that can be modeled by directed graphs. I worked on citations. What does that have to do with biostatistics? Well, it was early in my career, and there was a woman who was suing for sex discrimination. It turned out that she had a heck of a lot of citations, more than others in her group. And that was used as evidence in court. So I was called on to work on citations. And I wrote a paper called with others who were called lifetime citation rates, which would project based on the current pattern of citations, what the lifetime rate would be. That has nothing to do with biostatistics. Actually, I wasn't a biostatistician then, but the point is that the ability to work on very different projects is really important. And it's something I look for when I hire.
Okay, another one. You emphasize the importance of encouraging open expression of differences in opinion. Could you share how you manage situations where opposing views create significant tension, and how do you ensure that your constructive discussions lead to a stronger final decision?
Yeah, that's hard. So we did have a situation where, somebody does some research and somebody else thinks that's just not the way to do it. So, I try to say that there are many ways to approach a problem. And her way is good and his way is good. And if they'd like to collaborate and see which one is better in certain situations, that would be really nifty. But they weren't really talking to one another. I didn't. Well, I stopped people from talking at once at an OBR meeting. I say, whoa, whoa, we've got to talk one at a time so everybody can hear everybody else. And I'm going to call on you and make sure everybody gets a turn. I even call on people who don't raise a hand and ask them if they have something to contribute. So I can keep the conversation civil, even if I say, okay, Daisy, that's enough. The names have been changed to protect the guilty. And then I try this one-on-one thing. I mean, we've had a couple of disagreements. Two people were supposed to work together, and one of them didn't want to do it because he thought he needed to get publications, and this project was too long-term. And I broke it up. He said, okay, you don't have to do it. So that there are different solutions depending on the situation. But I mean, I think these two people talk to one another. They have to talk to one another. At least, if you pass in the hall, we're not there that often, but if you pass in the hall, do say hello. There've been a couple. you know, where somebody thought somebody took away something from someone else. And I say, no, 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 you can't do that. You got to share. And I speak to people one-on-one, and then I try to put them together. I don't know. I think, you know, the comments I made about being together frequently in person, I think that makes a big difference. It's much harder to keep everybody on an even keel when they're not in. I don't know, you know, I haven't tried to do a sociogram because there's some relation. One, a sociogram is also a directed graph, guys. That's a who to who relates to whom. So I would be in the middle, and everybody would have an arrow toward me, and I would have an arrow toward everybody else. But then the arrows between individuals may be in two directions or not. I haven't tried to do that, to think about whether X and Y have a relationship. Maybe I should. It's a good topic for an OBR meeting. They won't understand. They won't relate to sociograms, but maybe I'll just do one and project it.
So in the spirit of today, okay, I'll ask this question, and there's a raised hand. You've had 10 bosses in your lifetime, males and females. Okay.
No. Oh, yes, I guess I have. I'm very peculiar in that I don't, so I think I've mentored mostly females, but I haven't been exclusive. I recently gave a talk at the caucus about my career, and got an email from a woman saying, I'm a staff scientist at NIH. Can I talk to you one-on-one? And I said, my answer was, oh, I'll talk to any woman at NIH. And we have, you know, she's coming to give a seminar. That's the upshot of that. I don't distinguish very much between males and females in terms of my relationships. It's kind of weird. But I don't distinguish between people who come from other countries or who's from American of origin from different countries. Okay. So I just do it.
There is one from Jessica.
Yeah.
What would your advice? Yeah, go ahead.
What would be your advice to young female researchers looking to have their voice heard in a field such as biostats that's still predominantly male? How is the gender parity at NIH? Oh, God. Well, the first thing to say is my group is about half and half, male and female. Even when I came, I wasn't the only woman in the group. And the head of NHLBI at that time was married to a professional woman, and he was really good with women. He was a very odd fellow, but he was really great with women, and he was very supportive of me. I've been in a room where I was at a meeting, an international meeting of cardiovascular clinical trialists, and I noticed there were only 2 women in the room, and it was an invited meeting at Versailles, and I thought, your job at this meeting is to get invited next year. And so what I did was I shot off my mouth. You know, you gotta notice me if I have something to say, and that worked. So, you know, not everybody can do that. I think many of us are not extroverts. I'm, you know, I'm an outlier on the extrovert scale. I think you have to learn to assert yourself in a way that people understand. So if you're doing a consultation, then you have to, like I did with this doc at this other university, you have to say, I think I can help you. Can we talk about this project? And let's see how the conversation goes. So that's one way, that's a one-on-one way. In a group, I think you have to say something. You have to contribute to the group discussion. Otherwise, you're anonymous, and it doesn't help either you or women in general. And the other question is, how is the gender parity at NIH? NIH is very big on, DEI, B. B is for belonging. Belonging is harder, but DEI is a big thing that includes women as well as members, non-whites, and I, my group is very heterogeneous. I don't know why. I think at one point I might have said we need another woman. I might have, but I'm almost unconscious. I mean, if I hire now, I don't have a gender preference or a race preference. I have warned people who are not white to not take jobs that are going to end up being over their head just because everybody's anxious to have a black or a green or a yellow in these days. I think that's a threat of how DEI goes astray. So the gender parity at NIH, let's see, the head of the blood division is female, the head of the lung division is male, head of the heart division is male. And I don't even know who, there's another division, and the head of the intramural division is male. So there's one female division director. And that's been the case probably as long as I've been there, because the wife of the head of NIH was a division director at NIH, and he couldn't supervise her because that would be a conflict of interest. But so that was a long time ago. I think gender parity, well, I can talk about NHLBI. I don't think it's bad. I know in another institute, I was a fly on the wall after a seminar, and I heard a branch chief say, well, you have a family, you're a woman. I was appalled. I actually told somebody else not to go work for him. So I guess I can't speak about NIH in general. The director of NIH is a Black man, and he's been the director for a number of years now. There's a center at NHLBI, which is headed by another Black man who is really, really smart. I admire him. He was acting director of my division for a while. And when he left, when he was acting, so when the real division director was appointed, we had a going away party for him, and I baked a cake. I can't remember baking a cake for many people. So I might not be the right person to ask this question to, because in a way I'm very unconscious. And I think that's a good thing.
That's exactly right. And if you're unconscious, then you're not biased, right? One way or the other.
Well, I mean, Jan Dasgupta is a very good old friend of mine. That's that.
That's exactly that. And I will ask the last question because we're almost running out of time. And this is something you said earlier, that you give people what they need. How do you gauge that?
I'm an observer of the human condition. I mean, this self-reflection is maybe an example of that. Sometimes they come to you, and sometimes other people make comments and you say, they need some help here. Like, somebody said to me, well, I worked with him, but he seems to be too busy. And that rang a bell. So I addressed the person who seemed to be too busy one-on-one. And he pretty quickly decided he wasn't too busy. So, I explained to him that he was conveying that he was too busy, whether it was, he wanted to do his own research. I mean, bless him, because he's very smart. But I said, giving that impression is not helpful for OBR, nor for you. So I think it's picking up on little things.
Thanks, Nancy. And I know this is not, we are not in the room, but if we were, I think I'd say, let's give you a standing ovation. So I don't know what the standing ovation equivalent is in Zoom.
There's some applause things in the oh, there go the hands, the hearts. Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was fantastic, and I will get up earlier for you anytime if you want me to.
How many times have we had breakfast at ASA meetings?
I know. Thanks, Nancy. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for making us a part of your day.